everyone, welcome to the Bountiful Farmhouse. We are going to put up the beans this afternoon. So I have about 3 pounds of green beans and a little over half a pound, not quite a pound, of the yellow wax beans. Beans are probably one of the easiest things to preserve from your summer veggies in the garden. So we're going to use a pressure canner because beans are not acidic enough to be on their own, but the simple method is that there's no simple syrups, there's nothing, that just boiling water that goes into your beans. We're gonna raw pack, which means that we're just not gonna cook the beans or do anything with them prior to putting them into our jars. The jars don't have to be sterilized before you use them. I'm just gonna rinse them really well, get them really hot because a hot liquid is gonna go into them. And I am also gonna put my lids on to simmer so that they're warm as well, so they're will seal better and they're not a shock when they go into the canner. This is a Tefal, it's very easy. There's 2 dials that I have to worry about. That's it. It has about 3 cups of water in it and a rack. You always put a rack on the bottom of any pan that you're using. You can really pressure cook in anything, but you have to have a rack. You don't want the bottles to sit right on the bottom. And so anyway, there's about 3 cups of water in there and then a little bit of just white vinegar to help keep from the pot staining as it's steaming. And I'm not going to turn that on yet because it's a process and we'll walk you through that as we go. But I am going to get the water on to boil. To prepare the beans for canning, all you're going to do is, there's 2 ways. You can just snap off the top, which I'm going to, and I'm going to leave the little stem, if you will, I don't know what it's called, on the bottom of the bean. You can cut them up into 1-inch pieces to use, but I'm going to leave them whole because I like them that way. And then we wash them so that I can put them into the jars. So I'm going to go ahead and just start cutting off the ends of these. Okay, so we've got all of the top piece broken off of all the beans. We've sorted out to get any of the bad ones out. I'm going to wash them up, but this is what's really fun. This is our first harvest of green beans. There's a ton more little ones out there growing. So we'll have a few batches to put up, and I'm excited because there's a few recipes I want to try. There's a balsamic bean, and then there's a lemon garlic that I want to try as well. So hopefully we'll get a few more pounds off of our plants out there. I'm just going to wash these, running them under cold water. They're not that dirty. They haven't been on the ground or anything, so I'm just going to try to kind of clean them up a little bit. What I did find when I was measuring into the jar, so the beans need to set at least 1 inch below your top. So I'll use this to measure that 1-inch heading. And so I can see from this, if I put it on the inside, I can see that the beans have to sit, they have to sit at least here, like the rounded part. So we're gonna have to cut these to fit them in because we're gonna stack them in or pack them in pretty tight. But I think we're gonna have to cut them. Right now I'm just getting the jars rinsed. Again, you don't have to sterilize them when you're doing a pressure canner because part of that process is sterilizing. What I am looking for is any divots, because these are older jars, so any divots, broken, nicked, or anything in that, you don't want to use those, obviously. I always put my jars in like a cookie sheet. I don't want to put anything on the counter, it'll burn it. So I also have, because this will get hot from the liquid that's going into them, I just have a breadboard underneath there to keep the heat off of the counter. But this way, if there's any spills, especially when I'm doing jam, there's always spills when I do jam. But this will keep it from getting all over, make an easier cleanup for me. Okay, I'm just going to move these over into the sink so I have them by me. And again, we're going to break them just because they will fit into the jar a little bit easier. if I were using, these are pints, so if I was using a quart jar, I wouldn't have to break them. I could just stand them up. The really long ones. Okay, and that's about where our inch headspace was. You also want to get any air bubbles out, especially with your pressure canning. You don't want air bubbles in there. The important part is that with pressure canning, you leave enough space at the top of your jar for room to expand. And then to place the lid on that, I'm just going to get just a clean cotton cloth, and I'm using just white vinegar again. It just helps clean the rim to ensure a better seal for those lids to go on. You want to always make sure you're using new lids, so you don't want to reuse old lids. There's huge odds against them resealing again. You can use them for freezer jams and things like that because you don't have to seal them, but to do anything water bathing or pressure canning, you definitely want new lids. To tighten, we're just going to do that 2-finger tight, not too tight, not too loose. So we've got all the beans minus a handful, so we'll just cook those up for dinner as fresh beans that way. But so a little, what did we say, 4 pounds-ish? 3 pounds gives us 2, 4, 6, 8 pint-sized jars. So remember, if you're using quart, you'll have less than that. At this point, you can add canning salt if you want. If you have the pint size, you're going to add half a teaspoon of salt. If you're using the quart size, it's a full teaspoon. I'm not going to add salt. I don't want to add anything to them because if we use them for different recipes, then I can add the seasonings and stuff that we will need at that point. The last one is getting filled. I'll get the lids on them, and then we will turn on the pressure canner, and I'll walk you through those steps. Like I say, all of them are a little bit different, but the processing time is about the same. The thing with your pressure canners, you want to make sure that it is centered over your flame. They recommend that you don't use them on like the camp chefs, you know, like because we can do canning outside and stuff, but they ask not to do that because the flame is so different. But you do want it because it can ruin your pot if it's not centered on your flame. I'm going to turn this on to a high flame. Like I say, there's about 3 cups of water in there and a little bit of vinegar just to help so it doesn't stain the pot. And then I'm just going to set these down inside. The bottles can touch each other in here. That's not a problem. And this is made to stack 2 rows of pints. But we're not going to need that. We're just going to need the 1 row. So I'm just going to set those in there. Put the lid on nice and tight. What you're watching for in your steamer is that I have mine open for steam to come out because this is what I'm going to be watching as this steams. I'm going to let it boil, and I'll start hearing steam come out of here. As soon as there's a steady steam, I'm going to watch that for about 10 minutes, and then I will set it to my setting, and it's going to be 3 because of the altitude that we have here. I'm wanting to maintain between 12 and 15 psi. Again, everyone's different. Some of them have knobs that you can set it specifically for that. So I just know from my book that 3 is going to help me get that for my altitude. And then I'm going to watch this. Once I have a steady stream and I've set these both to 3, I'm going to let it cook for 20 minutes. And you don't touch it, you don't disturb it. And then after it cooks for 20 minutes, you release the steam really, really slowly. First, you take it off, boil, and let it kind of cool down all by itself for a little bit. And then you release the steam really slowly. You don't want to open this up or you'll explode and it will be ugly. So that's the longest part of the beans is waiting for all of this to happen. That's the one thing about steam canning. Pressure canning is that it takes a long time. Some recipes can take up to an hour. So the pressure cook is done and it's all vented and cool enough to get things out. But I've noticed a huge, it's not a problem because it is safe. I've verified with the National Canning website and everything is safe. But as you can see, I've lost water. Everything is sealing tight and they're going to be okay. But here's the problem. I've packed too tightly, and I also just learned that the water needs to be at about 140 degrees, not boiling. And the water that I used was not boiling. It was simmering, so it was probably hotter than it should be. But there's not enough room for that expansion to happen. And so lessons learned as we go. This is the first year canning beans. I froze them last year. But like I said, they're not spoiled. They've sealed. Every one of them has sealed that's come out. We'll use them. The beans that are not covered by liquid will discolor, but they are still food safe. And so I'll probably share these with people so that they can eat them before they lose the color and maybe not be so appetizing looking. But so lessons learned from this. Do everything that we did. Just don't pack your jars so tight when we're using this to get the air bubbles out. Just make sure that there is still enough floating room in there. You've still got your 1-inch head space, but that there's floating room in your jars so that the water can expand, and then you won't have it escape out of the top of the lids. So this wraps up this episode of beaning process, of processing our beans. If you like what you see, please subscribe below. Leave us your comments. We're getting great comments from you all. Love to hear from them. We try to respond as quickly as we can. So thank you again for joining us.